Today we have the opportunity to chat with Mike Schmittler. So good to have you with us, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul.
Yeah, this will be fun. Relax.
You said that. I don't know if it's going to be fun, but let's do it.
I do feel for you. You know, yeah, everybody comes in here and you know, into the political realm for the first time. In your case, I believe.
Absolutely.
You know, on camera. What do I do? So, well, tell us first of all. I guess you know, why are you taking the jump into the boiling cauldron here? You know, of the political realm. What kind of experience to bring with you? You know, that would equip you for the job.
I would boil it down to three things. You know, why I'm running. So I think first of all, I'm a good listener. And we'll get into why I think that's true. I've got the experience for the job. I worked for a very large organization. It was Lethbridge. I think a lot of people know that company.
The concrete company.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where concrete leadership comes from.
Very
so
clever. Okay.
So from Lethbridge. And the third thing is that experience. I think I was asked a lot of very hard questions, so I know how to ask hard questions. I know that council is a governance board; it's not an operational board, and it is a board. You know, it directs a very big corporation.
Yeah.
So you know, my job is to ask the city manager good questions, right? And I think I'm well suited to do that. So,
okay.
So maybe we'll just get into a little bit of detail. So,
sure.
You know, we've done 10,000 of these so far.
Okay.
We've been door knocking. I've done personally myself about a quarter of those.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, I was not looking forward to that part of the endeavor, but
The door knocking, you mean, or
just that it's unnerving. It's difficult to walk up to somebody's door and knock and say I'm running for council.
right?
But if you throw yourself into it, it's going to school. You know, you really do learn what's on people's minds. So I've been doing that, and I have to tell you, two recurring things come up. I have to say that, you know, people say they don't want another bike lane that serves a few dozen people. They want a third bridge. You know, that's just a really simple line.
So kind of thumbs down, generally speaking, to bike lanes, but people are wanting the third bridge, even despite the costs?
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
We'll get into No, they don't want their taxes to go up, but they want a third bridge. But we're going to get into some ways that we can maybe do that, right? So that was one thing. Exhibition Park, of course, comes up. But it comes up in the context of, you know, is my money being spent wisely? You know, that's the context. And then the overarching thing is always that they feel that their taxes are too high and that they're not being spent wisely. It was a thing my dad taught me. My dad was a plumber. And what he taught me was the rule of 72. And it's really, really simple. You take, let's say you have $10,000 to invest in a GIC and you get 5%. I'll make this quick, Paul, I promise. How long does it take for your money to double? So that 5% GIC, you take 72 divided by the interest rate and you get 14. So your $10,000 becomes $20,000 in 14 years. But it also works for costs. So I think the thing that people should know is we think that you get a 5% increase, you go, what's the big deal? It's 5%. Well, the big deal is that if the current inflation rate is 2%, you know, that's what it's advertised at. So you're 3% above that, right? So 5%, if you just do that simple rule of 72, 72 divided by 5, your taxes will double in 14 years. The simple math on, let's say your taxes are $4,000 today. At a 5% increase, in 14 years, they're $8,000. In 28 years, another 14 years, they're $16,000. And compare that with if it was only 2%, if it was only at the rate of inflation, current rate of inflation, it would take 36 years for your taxes to go from $4,000 to $8,000. At that same 36 years, you'd be comparing $8,000 at 2% inflation. With 5%, your taxes would be $24,000, starting at that same $4,000. I know that takes up a little bit of our time here in the interview, but I did a video on it on my Facebook page. I hope people go and take a look at that. But it's really, really important. I think when people look at it and they say, well, it's just a 5% increase, what's the problem? The problem is year over year over year over year, the compounding impact of that. And it's why it's so important that governments everywhere, not just municipally, but federally and provincially, that they have to scrutinize their costs. They have to look for better ways to do things so that we can at least stay within the rate of inflation.
Yeah, I mean, taxes is a huge issue in every election. And so the question is, how can we either keep them where they're at or actually start decreasing taxes? But when you do that, of course, there's always demand from the public for more services and so forth, right?
Absolutely.
Again, are they necessary services? Well, again, that's debatable, right? So how would you go about decreasing taxes, if at all?
Yeah, great question. And so decreasing taxes is pretty tough. So I don't go out there promising anything to anybody, but I do have some practical experience. So one of the things I would tell you is in running a business, especially the business that we ran here in Lethbridge, I had the privilege of working with, not directly with the city, but indirectly. The city put out a contract, sidewalk, curb, and gutter. When it needs to be replaced, it cracks up in front of your house. It isn't a city employee that comes out and replaces that. It's a contractor that comes out.
Okay.
It'd be McNally or Tallstrip, others have bid on that contract. But the city's done that for decades. And I can tell you, because I supplied concrete to at least one of those contractors, it was a really, really, really competitively bid contract. The margins were razor thin.
Okay.
And yet, when you go to something like paving, and this is the paving season, as we're all well aware, you go around and I think they do good work. I'm not making any comment about the quality of the work, but it's all city employees. It's city paving equipment. It's city trucks. It's all city employees. And I think that can be, why could that not be contracted out? It's just an example, but it's a lived example. It's not theoretical, it's one that I've actually lived.
So that, in your view, that could actually reduce the city's costs and again, reduce taxes potentially?
Absolutely, and I think, there's always been this misnomer that when you, if you do something a different way, you're automatically reducing the level of service. And I don't buy that. I don't buy that. The sidewalk, curb and gutter work that I've seen looks very, very good. So I think that contracting out is a potential. And Paul, what I would say is, if I'm aware of that through my business experience, that's just one example. There's likely dozens of other examples where we could look at contracting out. We could look at doing things a different way than we currently do it. And let me just add some meat on those bones. And I took a fair bit of flack when I put this on my Facebook page, but Coaldale, for instance, they put out a comparison of 8 municipalities and what the salaries and wages are per capita, right? So they just take the total bill and they divide it by the number of people. And that way you can compare community against community. Now, I'm not vouching for what municipalities they picked, but in that comparison, Lethbridge was number one. We had the highest salaries and wages per capita. They had, now they looked really good in that one. They were the lowest, and they picked the comparators, of course. But that wasn't the important thing to me, that they were less than half of ours. But that Lethbridge was 48% higher than the average of all 8. Now, anybody can go and they can do that comparison, and I would welcome anyone to do that. But Coaldale puts it right on their website. And that's why I bring up, when you ask me the question, there is a way that I'm aware of with some contracting out that I think we can provide at least the same level of service, and I think we can provide it at a lower cost. But when you look at one of the biggest challenges I think Lethbridge has, it's around salaries and wages. And so I think that's the.
Are you hearing that? Sorry to interrupt you. Are you hearing that from the doorstep, as you're knocking on doors, saying, we're paying employees too much, or?
Here's how I would answer it. Both on the doorstep and from business people that I know.
Okay.
I don't know of a business person in Lethbridge that doesn't have a story of an employee being picked off by the city of Lethbridge at way more money than they could pay. I have an example of it. Great guy, maintenance guy. I probably shouldn't bring that up because you can figure out who he is.
Okay.
But great guy. We really hated to lose him, but we didn't have a prayer of meeting that kind of a wage.
Right.
And so they came to the city, as they should, right? They should seek out the best compensation.
Yeah, well, of course, personally, we want to do our best, right? But yeah. Okay.
But as a taxpayer, do I really want to be competing against my own tax dollars? So that was one of the things that I wanted to point out. So It's a bit of a harsh thing to say, but if you're struggling to keep your wages and salaries under control, maybe you should have less wages and salaries to control. And you do that through things like contracting out.
Okay. Well, we're up against the clock a bit here. I wanted to throw this out as well. Your thoughts on, again, the homeless situation in our city. Always a concern for our residents here, because it tends to bring with it, there's addiction issues there, and crime and violence and, drugs and so forth that comes along with it. Any thoughts briefly on how to address that? Yeah,
so it's a big nut to crack. And again, I always want to come back to, I don't want to cut the services that, we need all these services. If I've learned anything knocking on doors, is there's a lot of need out there. But two things. The supervised consumption site, to me, was just like the movie. If you build it, they will come. And that's what happened. I remember asking people at the time, well, if you don't want the supervised consumption site here, do you want 188 people to lose their jobs? Well, no, that's not the goal. But the goal isn't that. The goal is to solve the problem, right?
Yep.
And so I think what happens is, and we do this in many ways, but the supervised consumption site was the best example of it, that if you overbuild those facilities, you shouldn't be surprised that people come from all over the province to our city. And that is exactly what happened. And the other thing I would say is, I talk to businesses right near the homeless. I go and I knock on the doors. Our business was not far from the homeless shelter. And what they overwhelmingly say is, it's the same repeat offenders that keep coming back and are continuing to reoffend. And it's a handful, right? The vast majority they're just down on their luck, or they're addicted or whatnot, and we need to help them as much as we can. But there's a handful that we need to take off the streets. And that's a hard thing to say, but they can't be on the streets. So,
okay. Interesting.
So I did want to say a couple things about the third bridge.
Okay, yeah, we're up against the clock, but sure, talk a bit about the bridge, because, people want it, obviously.
You bet.
It'd be great to have one, but the costs, of course, and that's going to impact the tax burden, right? Probably?
For sure, but I think the alignment makes it impacts it a lot. I think the alignment needs to be something that incorporates the airport and ties together economic growth in Lethbridge. So if we took that route much further south, first of all, the crossing would be a lot lower, down in the Popson Park area, for instance. We could build that bridge a lot cheaper than the original alignment. We can tie it together with the airport, and that way you can attract federal, provincial, and private funding to do development around that airport area. One other thing I wanted to add, if I really can, really quickly here, Paul, is on my website, I have a picture of a trailer that says, "Why did the chicken cross the road?" Do you know the trailer I'm talking about? It's on 43rd Street North.
Okay.
So the point of it is that on the east side of 43rd Street, on the north side of the highway, is the county. And what that trailer is pointing out is the taxes are way lower in the county than they are in the city of Lethbridge. Well, I went and looked it up, Paul, and the reason I'm bringing this up is, if we want to expand the tax base of Lethbridge, the hospital, the university, and the college don't pay taxes, and they shouldn't, right? And they're jewels. That's why people like my family came here. But we do need to expand the tax base. Otherwise, all of those costs for all those services are going to be borne increasingly by taxpayers. And so when you look at
where would you expand it to?
Oh, so the point I'm making is, you can simply do an internet search, is what I did. I did an internet search to find out what business taxes are compared to other places. And there was only one. Edmonton was the only place I could find with higher business taxes than here. The point I'm making is, if you want to attract business to expand your tax base to pay for all those services, you can't have some of the highest business taxes.
Okay.
And just really quickly, Lethbridge County is 41% of our taxes, 41%. Coaldale is 47%. Tabor is 52%. Claresholm, 53%. Brooks, 62%. If you want to attract businesses so that we can pay for all the services that we really cherish, you've got to be competitive on your business taxes so we can grow that tax base.
And I am out of time. So I've got to leave it there.
I got
Mike.
it in, Paul.
But Mike, very interesting perspective. So thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it.